Good afternoon, Mr. St. Pierre. Welcome to my presentation on William Golding's novel, Lord of the Flies. Over the course of this presentation, we're going to be covering various aspects and insights that I've noted in my study notes, along with an analysis of how Golding uses characterization and symbolism to convey theme in his novel, Lord of the Flies. All of the themes in Golding's novel, Lord of the Flies, revolve around the question of what it means to be human. He asked himself questions about human psychology, human nature, human behavior, what it means to say that something is innate in us, whether certain aspects of our behavior are inevitable, and he just generally considered this a question of what can be done given what we know about the human condition in order to properly organize our societies in such a way as to mitigate the effects of what Golding sees as an inherent evil within all of us. The first question Golding asks himself about human nature and human behavior is, what is innocence? What does it mean to say that somebody is innocent? What does it mean to say that someone has lost this innocence? And can it really be said of someone that they are innocent in the first place? J.D. Salinger's novel, Catcher in the Rye, a novel often juxtaposed with Golding's novel, is suggestive of a society that corrupts its youth who would otherwise retain innocence and goodwill had it not been for the constraints imposed upon them by society. Golding's Lord of the Flies is much more cynical than that. V.V. Subbarao, in his analysis of Lord of the Flies, says the following: "The Catcher in the Rye depicts the fall from adolescence into adulthood. Lord of the Flies shows that children are already fallen. Their innocence is just ignorance." End quote. And so it's only because children are yet to discover their callous nature that they can be observed as kind and altruistic. And thus it is not until the children are truly alone, truly autonomous, and in charge of their behavior that we can come to accept this reality. And so in choosing the setting of a secluded island, Golding aimed to show and to demonstrate that even without the constraints of society, our inherent nature as humans is to behave in ways that are cruel and callous and unjust. And so, in the words of Samuel Hines, there is an emphasis on the darkness of men's hearts, and the novel tells us a good deal about evil, but about salvation it is silent. And so there seems to be very little talk in the novel about what to do about this fact that Golding has identified. So perhaps it is because Golding had nothing in mind, no conception of what form salvation would even take. He had no way forward to present. Or, if you want to be even more cynical, you can believe that Golding thought the concept of salvation really was an empty one, that given our nature, we are destined to succumb to evil, and there's nothing really that can be done about that. Or perhaps a more religious interpretation would be that he thought that we were in need of a divinity to impose order and morality onto us, in the form of, say, something along the lines of the Ten Commandments, something that would compel us to behave in such a way as to defy our nature in fear of the retributive power of this deity. The next examination of the novel takes the form of a psychological analysis, also relating to theme. It's been suggested that the three main characters of this novel take the form of Freud's tripartite organization of the human psyche, i.e. the ego, the id, and the superego. Now, if you're not familiar with this distinction, the ego is what Freud defines as what develops to mediate between the unrealistic id and the external real world. The id is the primitive and instinctive component of personality. It consists of all inherited components of personality present at birth, whereas the superego incorporates the values and morals of a society, which are learned from one's parents and from others. According to this arrangement, Ralph would be portrayed as the ego, Jack as the id, and Piggy as the superego. So what will follow now is an analysis of how these three components are used by Golding to convey theme and develop his pessimistic impression of human nature and human behavior. Golding considers which of these three aspects of our psyche reign supreme, which are subservient to the others, and which should be used in what circumstances. And that can be found throughout his novel. The first way that we will examine this aspect of Golding's work is by considering characterization. So we're going to examine the characters of Ralph, Jack, and Piggy and how they relate to this distinction between id, ego, and superego, and how that distinction relates to the theme that Golding wishes to convey in his work. The first character that we'll examine in the novel Lord of the Flies is Jack. Jack is the id of our psychology, and he's portrayed as the fundamental evil and the downfall of our humanity. He is portrayed as he represents rather, our compulsion for murder, for authoritarianism, our longing for safety, and our inclinations towards sadism. He serves as a reminder throughout the novel that our id, the more primitive area of our mind, is always eager to sacrifice freedom for safety. And this is indicated and shown by the attraction and the affection that the little ones display for Jack and for his rhetoric. And as per Benjamin Franklin, this is likely a sentiment that Golding himself would have shared, they who give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And that can probably be considered one of the central themes of this novel. And so when Jack confronts their fear of the beastie, the island beastie that appears sometime near the beginning of the novel, he appeals to the very inclinations that Golding has identified as the faults of humanity and the traits that will lead to our downfall. He promises to kill it, to hunt it down, to get rid of the fear, and he appeals to the children's longing for strength and for protection. He says, bollocks to the rules. We're strong, we hunt. If there's a beast, we'll hunt it down. We'll close in and beat and beat and beat. And so in doing so, he's just reiterating what the more unconscious and primitive id of our psyche would be repeating to us when we would be considering how to deal with such a situation, with such a fear. And this fear is something that will be explored further in the presentation. The second character that we're going to be examining is the character of Piggy, who is portrayed as the superego of our mind in this novel. In developing the character of Piggy, and by situating him within a network on the island, Golding shows that the superego is both an indispensable and an easily dismissed aspect of our psyche. Piggy makes the valiant attempt to contributing to island affairs, and yet is dismissed out of hand due to his awkward appearance and demeanor and lack of self-confidence. And the parallel is made between this character and our superego, insofar as the superego is a newly developed capacity of our psyche, relatively newly developed in evolutionary time, and is thus seen by the whole of our mind as an entity making awkward, not always straightforward, often difficult to follow, not entirely coherent, yet certainly valuable contributions to our cognition and to our thinking. And you can see this frustration on the part of Piggy when he finds himself unable to communicate. He says, "You and your blood, Jack Merridew, you and your hunting, we might have gone home had it not been for you." And this is after many days of frustration and of anger. And Golding's message here is quite explicit. It says, the id, as he perceives it, is continuously undermining the efforts of the superego to transcend human nature and to wrestle its way to peace, to home, away from savagery and violence towards harmony.